How you doing? Welcome to the channel. I'm Jimmy. We're making it work. I got a lot of videos spending a day in the shop fixing cars. Professional mechanic. Have been for 40 years now, 4 decades. But I do a lot of hot rod stuff and project truck stuff too. Those videos are usually on Sundays. This video I'm going to be putting an electric choke on my 750 Holley 4160 model carburetor. I bought a Blueprint Engines 383 engine. Those videos will be out soon too. We're going to install it in my 62C10. But it came with a manual choke. And as much as I like the idea of an old school manual choke, I think that went the way of the dodo bird in the 30s. And it's something you got to remember to push it off after you run the engine a minute or two. If you don't remember, then it's too much fuel. So I'm going to put an electric choke on there, properly adjusted. Does everything for you like modern technology. Let's get to it. Stay tuned. All right, guys, that's my Blueprint 383. I'm putting cast valve covers that I had on my other 350 that came apart. That carburetor is a good carburetor especially for street use. It's a mild performance carburetor. Metering block only on one side, not on the other. That's what makes it a 4160. The 4150 has metering blocks on both sides. Of course, there is a metering plate in here that you can change to tune the secondaries if they're too lean and all that kind of thing. But you won't know that till you read plugs or put an O2 sensor in your exhaust to monitor air fuel trims and stuff like that. Most people might not tinker with that stuff, but they definitely want an electric choke. So I'm going to take this carburetor off. I've already got the electric choke stripped off my donor carburetor that I had sitting around from prior projects. Same carburetor, 750, but it's pretty old. Obviously you can see the difference between a polished one and an unpolished one. Plus this one had the cool electric choke. So I take everything off, kind of keep it in order. This housing will go on the carburetor first. The linkage will be attached. There's a small clip. These leverage bars and leverage arms actually work the choke. When you hit the gas, it enables the choke to close. It also steps up the idle speed with the levers and linkages in the back here. This is what will raise your fast idle. When the choke flap closes, it increases your idle and increases the fuel trim, so you get more fuel. When the engine's cold, it doesn't atomize as well, so that's why they do that. In any event, let's grab these tools here, get started, get this carburetor off here. Shouldn't be too big of a thing. I bought carburetor studs to put longer studs in here and a 1-inch phenolic spacer to reduce carburetor heating. I might have to get some sockets for these. These are in there pretty good. Yeah, let's grab some sockets to get to that a little better. Now, sometimes people will try to leave this hardware on here and lift the carburetor up, but you risk having the hardware fall in the manifold, and that will probably make it so you have a bad day if any of the valves are open, and they usually are. So I always take the hardware completely out. The vacuum advance was connected to ported by Blueprint, the engine builder. Now I'm going to put my lift plate that I'm going to use to install this engine. I taped over the 2 barrel holes just so nothing would fall in here while things are happening around the area. I'm not going to tighten these yet because I have to check my carburetor studs. I'm going to I'll move the camera in a little closer here and there. Now, this is the fast idle screw. When your choke is closed, obviously, it brings the idle up. When you want the idle to come down, you'll notice when the choke opens up, it won't come down until you hit the gas. And it lets that choke linkage relax once you've removed the choke. This being a manual choke, it didn't drop off because it works a little differently. This is your vacuum secondary for your 4-barrel. It's got a very light spring in it, which is good. I was worried about that. I was going to order lighter springs because they come out of the box usually kind of stiff. And I'm not sure if Blueprint changes any of that or not, but I can feel it's much lighter than the other carburetor was. A lot of people are having problems with it. The 4 barrels don't all open. You're running on a 2-barrel and you don't even know it. One of the tricks that we use is you can put a paper clip on here, any kind of paper clip, bobby pin, whatever. And when this opens, it'll move down the shaft, and you'll see that it's come down quite a ways. You'll know it. You know your secondaries are working. You can kind of feel it too. I mean, there's a difference. When those secondaries open, it's not quite like you have a turbo, but you definitely feel an increase in power. There are little lock washers on those too. This is what goes in this linkage here. Now I'm going to put it back in the same order I take it off. I'll put it in here so I can put it on the other carburetor. This is different as well, so this will have to come off of here. this will also come off of here. I have to take this little clip off of here. Tries to let it shoot across your work area, garage, whatever it might be. Now this arm should be the same no matter what kind of choke you have, so you don't have to worry about trying to get it out of there. It's swedged in there so it can't fall out. Matter of fact, you'd have to do some machining to get it off, so we'll take this off next. Pretty tight. There is a little spring in here. Take note of this spring. It's pushing on this arm on the one bell crank, and it pushes on the other bell crank as well, because these two want to fight each other a little bit. It basically is a fairly stiff spring for what it does, just moving this little cam, but it keeps it so the throttle can move without forcing that to move until it's ready, if that makes sense. I definitely want to keep my parts and not let them go flying. Like that. That's what you don't want to do. Let me dig that part up, and we will start putting this back together. Now this one is going to go on the same way the other one came off, except the spring, the flat side of the spring, pushes on here, and the second lever grabs this little hook. So I want to get this to engage. You see this has a little hook here for the spring that has to go in that. So you want to grab that, line this up with the flat in the throttle shaft. It's a pretty tight machine fit, so can't get it with my meat hooks, it's too short, so we'll do it this way. And you want to make sure it's engaged on the flats. Now what that's doing is, see how this will let that stop and the throttle moves? So the choke doesn't interfere with throttle operation, but it's still capable of moving parts it needs to. The screws are slightly different lengths as well. These screws are shorter, so I'm keeping them in the housing. This little linkage lever has to go on here. Lever on the linkage, yeah, that's it. That little snap clip has to go back on as well, but you can do that after this is bolted to the housing. And I know it's not a polished choke housing, but they're $90, so I'm going to use one that's not polished. It's going to be under my air cleaner anyway. I'm not too worried about it, to tell you the truth. Make sure all your screws line up nice. This is a vent, don't worry about that. There's not a lot of things you don't want to lubricate. The carburetor linkage is one of the things you don't want to lubricate. When you put this housing on, you want your linkage underneath this red cam, so that when the choke moves, it moves the red cam, and the red cam gets to your idle speed screw and raises your idle. So this linkage has to be underneath this red cam. Just keep that in mind. It's got a bobber on it that weights it. That's what helps it drop back in place when as soon as the throttle gets released. If the choke's moved, the little weight on here brings down the idle. It's easy, right? All right, now I'm going to put that clip on. I use the new clip on the new carburetor. Doesn't really matter though. Hope that shows up. Gasket. This will probably be easier to put on with the choke flap closed, because the coil for the choke is cool. When you put battery voltage to that, the coil changes tension, and that's what actually opens the choke flap. You definitely got to make sure that this spring eyelet is on this tab, and you'll feel it when you roll the choke housing. That's how you know you caught it. If it's on one side of it, it'll only move one direction. It won't move it the other way. That's how I check it. I'm sure people have other ways of doing it. Of course, now your job's to keep it in place while you get the rest of your screws on it. This also has a little kink bend in it, so the higher part goes where the screws are, so it pushes on the housing when the screws aren't quite bottomed out. Some people over tighten these. You got to be careful of that. You just snug them up till that choke housing doesn't turn on its own. That's all. Now I'll do a preliminary adjustment on this. Now these screws you can leave a little loose so that you can adjust the choke. This is going to set the initial tension based on your climate. The colder the area is you're in, the more aggressive you want this to snap close, because the choke will stay on longer, right? That opens it. that closes it. See this line in the choke housing? I hope that shows up. This line in the choke housing here, it's right here. And this line here is about where you should start for most climates. And I keep the throttle open because if you don't have the throttle open, when you close this, it won't show you what you're doing until you hit the gas. Now when I close it, see how it latched itself down? Now as the choke heats up, it's obviously going to do this. And then when you hit the gas, that little red cam should drop and lower your idle. And then when it cools off again, it'll close back down. So in the climate I'm at, I'm not going to have this quite so tight. I'm going to put a little, relax this a little bit. You can go too far, obviously the choke won't do much, but basically I'm going to try it on the first line. So, because we're in Florida, I only want this choke to be on a minute or two, literally. If you're in a colder climate, you put it further up, the choke's going to stay on. It'll take a little longer for the spring to pull the choke open enough. But that's what you want if you're in an area where it's 40 degrees or 30 degrees. Here, that doesn't happen very often, so that's it. Electric choke installed. We'll do the manual choke on the other carburetor real quick too. Stay tuned if you want to see that. Arms on the same way. This little spring doesn't look right, but that's how it goes. All the pictures that you look at will show you that. This is connected to the throttle shaft. This is free sprung. Same thing, this is sprung as well. This is the hard part of these manuals, is holding these items while you put on the outer piece. And this little bar goes in the slot. And the only reason I'm really even putting this on here is so I have it if I ever need it in the future for whatever reason. This is a complete carburetor with a manual choke instead of an electric, that's all. Just like what was on my other engine, which we're going to have some fun with that one. Can't wait to get that running, but I'm not going to rush it. Might take 2 or 3 weeks, which equals 2 or 3 videos. We'll do the basic install. Then we'll work on some of the other things to finalize it. I got a serpentine belt kit for it, all kinds of things, so make sure you check those videos out. They'll be over the next few weeks, and they'll be on my main page as well with about 500 or so day in the shop videos and 700 or 800 shorts I've made. So there's plenty of videos to check out. Now if you hit the gas, it should raise the idle right there. Now when you let the choke off, it's going to let you lower the idle. As long as the idle screw, looks like this idle base screw's wound in quite a ways. Because this carburetor was flooding, I believe, is why it's sitting in my carburetor stash. These are easy to fix when they're flooding. You could buy a carburetor kit, fix it really inexpensively. The little needle and seat in here. The float itself, if the float is a problem, you can get those. You can do anything you want with these as far as repairs go. It's really handy if you know how to tinker with them yourself, though. Alright, I'm going to call that good. This is carburetor just going up on the shelf. Alright guys, we got that choke all done. Put the manual one away. And I'm going to put this one right here for safekeeping, get ready to put this motor in, so make sure you check those videos out. Hope this one helped you out a little bit if you're worried about doing it. It's not very complicated. I'm certainly not an expert, and it's been a long time since I did one, but we got it on there, we figured out. It's not that bad if you're patient. So make sure you torque the like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I hope I see you in the next video, because you're awesome.